Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I see Maggie, Morton. Is it Kira or Kyra? Hi, Felix.
It's Kyra.
Thank you, Kyra. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Peter. Hey, Lindsay.
Aye.
Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar for today is about trust mindsets. And as we get started, we'll just give folks another minute or two to join. But as we get started, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the slides. And as we get started, if you would please open your chat and let us all know where you are joining from today. I am in freezing cold and somewhat snowy Arlington, Virginia, right outside our nation's capital. Matt, you're in Raleigh. Hopefully you've got it. It's a little bit warmer down there at least. And Kira, oh, I'm so jealous. You're down in Florida. Everybody wants to be in Florida. Morton in Copenhagen. It must be already dark there. Hotlanta. Not so hot Hotlanta today, Andrew, huh? All right. Concord. Oh, yeah, Felix, at least we have sun. We have sun too. It is blindingly bright. I realized, they've talked about the snow, what do they call it? A snow drought, at least here on the eastern seaboard. It's been 3 years since I have seen any significant snow because I've been traveling during the winters or, either not here and we've had so little of it. So I'm super excited actually to have this snow. I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm used to having lots of snow. Lindsay, are you guys buried in the snow out there in Indy?
Not totally buried, but cold.
Oh, definitely.
Cold.
And Peter, you're up at Fordham, New York. I think the last thing I heard was not only did you get snow, but you're in for another round of it.
We had just about 2 inches on Tuesday, so not very much from somebody who's also originally from the Midwest. And another couple inches maybe this Friday. We'll see. But like you, it's been 2 years since there's been measurable snow on the ground in New York. So once is enough. We've had our dose of winter, and let's go on from there.
You're ready to go back into spring already, right?
Well, it's the start of the spring semester.
There you go. Peter, do you teach at Fordham?
I do. I'm in the business school at Fordham, and this spring I'm teaching a course in professional sales and sales management.
Ah, excellent. Feel free to reach out to me one-on-one if there's anything that I can do to be helpful, or if you think any of our content might be useful for your students. I work with them, not that you would need me to be involved. I used to teach at the MBA program at University of Virginia.
Oh,
And I
wonderful.
work with some other universities as well. So
Wonderful. Well, one of my required readings is Charlie Green's article about professional services and dealing with pricing, and it's really very helpful in class.
good. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Well, all right, everybody. It is a couple minutes after. I know we have a relatively intimate group today, which is great. It means more time for conversation and questions. So let's go ahead and get started. I anticipate a few more folks will be joining us as we go along. Just a few bits of housekeeping as we get started. One, this webinar is being recorded. The plan is for me to present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. Given that it's such a small group, feel free to jump in if you have questions. If you're not comfortable jumping in, you can also use the chat as we go along. Just put your questions in there. I will try to keep an eye on it as we go along, and we can also hold questions for the Q&A section. You will get links to the recording. I'll also send out a copy of the slides, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to as we go along. And I'll provide some other resources that will support the content and the conversation that we have. If you want to, if you're game for it, please feel free to turn your camera on. I'd much rather be talking to faces rather than blank squares with names in them. And this is going to be interactive. We have a couple of, well, we dropped the poll for today. We have a poll. We've got some questions where I'll be asking you to respond via chat. Feel free to use your reactions as we go along. Give me a thumbs up if you like it. Raise your hand if you want to jump in. And then finally, if you do have a question, raise your hand. If I don't notice it right away, just jump in and interrupt me. Most importantly, let's have a little bit of fun with this topic as we go along. So a little bit about Trusted Advisor Associates and about myself. We have been in the business of trust for going on 25 years now. It all launched with the original book, The Trusted Advisor, which was co-authored by Charles Green, David Maister, and Rob Galford back in 2000. We also have a 20th anniversary edition of that was released in 2021, I believe. Charlie Green went on to found Trusted Advisor Associates as a way to bring the content of that book to life. And we primarily work with private clients, organizations who want training, webinars, workshops on how their people can build deeper trust relationships. In the last few years, our focus has really been on increasing the reach to reach more individuals like you who are interested but may not have the opportunity to hire us that large corporations would. So Charlie went on to write 2 more books, one Trust-Based Selling, and the second was, or the third for him, was a book that he co-authored with a colleague of ours, Andrea Howe. I'm not stumping for the books. I really put this up there just to let you know our background and what our perspective, or where our perspective comes from in building trust. A little bit about me for those of you who have never met me before. I am the CEO of Trusted Advisor Associates. I took it over when Charlie Green retired during the pandemic. I come from a consulting background, primarily in technology consulting, but the people side of technology consulting. So organizational design and development, process reengineering, really understanding how people get work done and how they can do it better. I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton after I got my graduate degree, and then spent almost 15 years as a subcontractor or a direct employee with Computer Sciences Corporation. And I have to say, my favorite role in my corporate career was my ultimate role at CSC, which was Director of Client Development globally. So I got to work firsthand with our clients and with our account managers on what really makes things work. I do have an education. My MBA is from the University of Virginia, which is also where I taught at the MBA program after I had graduated. And I'm from St. Louis originally, so I have 2 degrees from St. Louis University in my undergraduate education. Now, enough about me. Let's make this about you. I'm really curious to hear, now that we've turned over into a new year, what is it that you have resolved to change going forward in 2024? And if you would pull up that chat and just share one of your New Year's resolutions. And it doesn't have to be professional, it can be personal as well. I will pop mine in here. My New Year's resolution is to keep in better touch with former and current clients. And I'm going to add that on the personal side also with my friends. You know, I find that I get really caught up in the day-to-day, and I don't take as much time as I should to just pause and think about all the people who are important to me in my life. So what are some of your New Year's resolutions? So Peter, you're looking to actually make some real changes in your curriculum.
Yes, in addition to teaching in the both graduate and undergraduate business school at Fordham, I'm also director of a Master of Science degree in what we call marketing intelligence. And it's a combination of analytics and marketing insights. So it's deep dive numbers, but it's also some of the qualitative side of marketing, looking for customer insights. And so much of marketing is being pushed by technology. Need to keep up with that, need to have a point of view about AI, and start working on what's called the marketing stack now of all the softwares that come into play with a marketing operation. So I'm looking to add some of that to keep our curriculum more current and more relevant for our students.
Yeah. It's the increase in technology has been, it's had a lot of interesting impacts on how we look at relationships and how we develop relationships. Right? Andrew, I see you're looking for some very specific wins. Now, are these, and I like this. It's not just about the work, it's also about managing that work-life balance. What are some of your other resolutions? Your word, oh,
I don't
Kira,
make
I love the
resolutions.
word of the year. Connection. Sorry, and Andrew, were you gonna jump in on something?
I just said I don't make resolutions.
Oh, you don't make resolutions, which is fine. And it sounds like, Kira, it sounds like you're in that camp too. I love that word connection, right? All right. And for those of you who don't make New Year's resolutions, and for those of us who do, right? I want to share a somewhat startling fact with you. It turns out that 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by the second week of February. So even though we start the year with the best intentions, things that we've identified that we want to change or that we want to grow or add or maybe remove from how we live, most of us fail. And I think that the reason most of those New Year's resolutions fail is because we don't have the right mindset behind them. And what's a mindset? Right? It's kind of a big word. A mindset is, simply put, that collection of thoughts and beliefs that determines how we respond to information and events. So you can see that it's important to have the right mindset when we're thinking about change. Because if we're not aware of our mindsets, we're not controlling how we react to information and events or how we respond. And so a mindset works like this. The mindset is a combination of our thoughts, how we perceive information or a situation, our understanding of it, our assessment of it, right? It's our judgment of it, and it's formed by everything that we have experienced and how we have trained our minds. So it's our perceptions. Based on how we perceive the information or an event, we have emotions, right? We may be confident based on how we're perceiving it. We may be interested. We might be concerned, or we might have fear. And as a result of those feelings, we behave in certain ways. We may choose to interact in a particular way. We might avoid a situation or avoid information that we don't like because we're concerned or we're worried about it. We may confront it. So how we perceive the world causes us to feel certain emotions, and then we act on those emotions. And so our mindsets, having the right mindset, the thoughts and beliefs that determine how we respond, is really critical. Because if we're not operating from an intentional mindset, we're kind of at the whims of our thoughts and feelings. changing your behavior often requires you to change your mindset. And this is a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that it's pretty simple to change your mindset. The bad news is it's simple to change your mindset, but it's not often easy because it comes from our history, our own personal story, all of the interactions that we've had. And these things are habitual and they're often subconscious. Excuse me. The good news, however, is that it only takes two things. It takes self-awareness and intentionality. In other words, changing your mindset is entirely within your control. And it's a lot more accessible to you than changing something like your level of experience, which may take years, or your level of education, which can take both time and investment. Right? So good news, bad news. Simple but not easy, but you can do it. So the 4 key characteristics of a trusted advisor relationship. And just in case it wasn't clear as we started this, the mindsets that I think are critical to adopt are oriented towards being trusted advisors to others. Right? So the 4 key characteristics of trusted advisor relationships. And this is content out of the Trusted Advisor, the book. 1, trusted advisor relationships are personal relationships. We talk all the time about trust in institutions. I may say, I trust my bank, or I trust the school where I got my degree, or I trust FedEx to deliver my package. But that institutional trust is really quite narrow. When we talk about trust relationships and trusted advisor relationships in particular, we're talking about personal relationships. Relationships between me and another person, not me with a company, not me with an organization, but truly those one-on-one relationships between 2 people. Secondly, trusted advisor relationships are two-way relationships. I can't just be a trusted advisor to someone. I can't just be trustworthy. I also have to be willing to trust the other person. When you think about how trust is created, right? If you think about somebody that you have a trust relationship with. And the way that relationship evolves, one person takes the risk of trusting another. The other person demonstrates that they're worthy of that trust. In other words, they're trustworthy. And then you both go back and forth doing both of those things until you have a consistent track record of both trusting the other person and being trustworthy. So it's impossible to have a trusted advisor relationship where only one person is trusting. We both have to be trusting. And this is, I think, to Peter's point about the fact that we're often very analytical, but the feelings are really important. Trusted advisor relationships are both rational. They carry the technical excellence and the experience, and emotional. They're deep emotional personal relationships. And when I say emotional, don't start thinking, oh, it's all about sitting around with boxes of Kleenex crying to each other. It really just means that this idea that the Godfather had of it's not personal, it's just business, it doesn't hold water, because we're doing business with people, and people are emotional beings. And so when we think about being a trusted advisor, we need to be a trusted advisor both technically and emotionally. And then the final characteristic of a trusted advisor relationship, the relationship is intrinsically about perceived risk. And what I mean by perceived risk is that feeling that we get, and we'll bring it back to this mindset, right? Everything that makes up who we are, those moments that we feel at risk, we feel vulnerable, or we feel that there's something that we feel like we want to do, but we're holding ourselves back. I can't say that, I don't have enough trust in the relationship, or they might not appreciate it. It's about us being willing to take risks, to demonstrate that we're human, and to show the other person that it's okay for them to take risks. And the biggest risk of all is the risk of trusting. Right? That's what we want our clients and our colleagues to do, to take the risk to trust us. That's a risk for them. And so in order to ask them to take that risk, we must first be willing to take the risk of trusting them. So 4 characteristics of trusted advisor relationships. How do we get there? Right? What are the mindsets that allow us to develop relationships that are personal, that are valuable both to us and to the other person? Right? Where we recognize the importance of risk taking and we're comfortable taking it, and where we're relating on both rational and emotional levels. These are 6 key mindsets. Number 1 is a focus on the other person. Thinking about what's important to them. How can we help them? What are they experiencing? If we have that focus on the other person, really everything else in the relationship will pretty much fall into place. Now, as professionals, it would seem obvious that we would be focused on the other person, but there are a lot of impediments to other focus. For example, we may believe that our technical capability or competency is enough. They just hired us to do a job. As long as I do that job, they should trust us. They should trust me, right? Or we may have difficulty maintaining focused, concentrated attention. Whether that's because we have other things happening, it can be something as distracting as the beeping and buzzing that comes from our devices, or whether that's because we're so focused on what it is that we think we need to do, or we're focused on what they think about us, right? All of that draws our focus away from the other person. Maybe it's just that we think that solving the problem is more important than understanding the problem. All of these are impediments to other focus. And I'll offer you a mindset hack. How can you stay focused on the other person? And it is this: focus on the person, not the problem. If you are truly focused on the person, not the problem you're trying to solve, then your focus will stay on the person. So that's mindset number 1, focus on the other person. Mindset number 2 is self-confidence. Now, self-confidence is about recognizing the value that you bring to the situation. And I encourage you to consider the fact that your value is more than just your technical expertise. And that the value that you bring is not only related to this particular situation or this interaction or this transaction that you're having. Your value is lasting, it is enduring. And in fact, it only goes up the more you're willing to dive in and explore and understand and connect with the other person. Right? So often when we think about self-confidence, we think about self-confidence as having the confidence to put the right solution forward or to share our point of view. And those are really critical. But consider that self-confidence also means having the confidence to hold back what you're thinking, to allow the other person to share their perspective, with the confidence that you will still have the right answer once they've finished explaining their point of view. Some of the impediments we see to self-confidence: being afraid that we're not right? Maybe they won't think that we're smart. Maybe they'll think that we don't understand them. And so often we try to rush towards bringing a solution forward because we want them to think that we're smart, that we have the answers. It could also be a lack of comfort with ambiguity. As long as I can push an answer forward or I can control the conversation, then I know I'm comfortable. I can stay in the areas where I'm comfortable, where I know I'm an expert. And so being uncomfortable with ambiguity often drives us to controlling conversations. Have the self-confidence to let the conversation go where it naturally will, and know that you can meet the client where they are at any point in that conversation. The mindset hack I offer you for self-confidence is to simply consider what additional value you bring to the relationship beyond the technical expertise to solve whatever the one challenge is that's in front of you. So, mindset number 2, self-confidence. Mindset number 3 is ego strength. Now, this sounds like a strange one for Trusted Advisor, where we spend so much time talking about maintaining a low self-orientation. And it also probably sounds similar to self-confidence, but it's something slightly different. Ego strength is the ability to take yourself out of the equation and focus on the process of developing the relationship. Right? So it is about not making it about yourself. Having the strength of ego to be accountable without driving into hyper responsibility. Have you ever known somebody who is so quick to take responsibility for things? It's almost like, if they see the weather forecast and say, oh, it's going to rain this afternoon, and then it rains, they're like, ha, I was right, as though they're the ones who made it rain, right? That's overhyped responsibility. We want to focus on accountability for ego strength. And then finally, a sense of objectivity. Again, an ability to remove ourself and our emotions, what we want from the situation, and really focus on the process. Some of the impediments to ego strength: a desire for recognition or an avoidance of blame, right? That gets in the way of being strong enough to focus on the process and the outcomes. Inappropriate emotional attachment to something, whether it's an idea, whether it's a perspective, where we, think about where we let what we want to get emotionally out of a situation get in the way of what we really need to achieve. And then finally, losing sight of the big picture. Peter, you have a question?
Yes, it just very quickly, forgive me for interrupting,
Yeah, jump in.
but talking about self-focus, particularly in a sales situation, is it important for the salesperson to acknowledge that that person has a financial interest in the outcome, and to be overt about that?
That's an interesting question. I've actually been thinking about that a lot, related to a conversation I had last week with some clients. I think it can be. And the reason that I say that it can be important to be overt about that fact is because if we don't acknowledge it, right, it's kind of the elephant in the room. And if we don't acknowledge it, it almost feels like it's a shameful thing that we're just trying to ignore. At the end of the day, doing business with people, there's nothing shameful about it. And we all recognize how business happens. I think that there's a twist that happens in professional services where we start to feel ashamed of asking for remuneration for doing our jobs. Whereas if I hired a contractor to come in and do my house, for example, do something to my house, say I hired a contractor to come in and replace the carpeting in my bedroom, and that contractor came in and they were replacing the carpeting, and halfway through I said, I decided I don't really want beige. I want to go with brown. Well, nobody would think twice about the contractor saying, okay, that's fine. It's going to add cost to the project. And yet, when we're selling or when we're delivering a project and we say, here's what's for offer, and the client comes back and says, well, I was thinking about something different, it's often very uncomfortable for us to say, well, hold on a second, that's something different. and that's got a different price associated with it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it deals with it very directly, and it reminds me, one of the best pieces of advice about pricing that was in one of Charlie Green's articles is to get price on the table early.
Early.
Don't duck the price issue. Get money on the table early, be honest about it, and it's actually a way of qualifying your prospect.
Yeah.
But that's tremendous advice, and professional service people often make a mistake in not talking about price early on in the relationship. It actually establishes trust.
Yeah, it does. Because it says, I trust you enough to talk about this.
I think
Right.
also in my business, I represent 10 businesses in real estate negotiations. And it's a way of building credibility and trust. I was in a meeting with a longtime client a couple of months ago, and I was saying, look, we have too much space. You can do with less. And I said to him, I know it sounds strange for somebody in my business to be telling you should take less space, but that's the right thing. And he agreed. But I think that also opens up, I know from experience, it opens up an opportunity for when I say, you should do you should do a 10-year lease instead of a 5-year lease. I said, look, the commission goes up, but here's why it's good for you. But you're not going to do it for that reason.
Right.
But here's why it's good for you is because you're going to get a bigger allowance or concessions or whatever. And so, it's kind of like what you say, you get it on the table, it builds trust. And I think it makes the rest of the conversation on related topics go much more smoothly.
100%, Andrew, that's exactly it. And it has to do with transparency, right? Even though everybody knows that this is how business works, sometimes if we don't acknowledge it out loud, it feels like we're kind of like we're doing something a little bit under the table. Right? But to be able to look someone in the eye and say, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I'm going to get a larger commission if you sign a 10-year lease. And these are the reasons why it's the right thing for you. That's very different than pushing them towards the 10-year lease and listing all the reasons that it's right for them. And they're sitting there in the back of their mind going, yep, and I bet you get more money for it.
Yeah, and if they ask the question, they say, but the commission goes up, doesn't it? You're
Sure.
kind of on the defensive.
Right. Yeah.
Not kind of, you are on the defensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Hayden, can you do me a favor and make a note that I want to send out a link to the Name It and Claim It blog? A lot of you who are familiar with us are probably familiar with the technique Name It and Claim It. But it's a technique that you can use to get difficult things like this out on the table up front while still building trust. All right, let's get through the other 3 mindsets here. Oh, first, your mindset hack for ego strength. Right? It's so simple. It's just a little mantra. It's not about me. Right? If you start to feel yourself thinking about, am I going to get the credit or am I going to be blamed? Or getting tied up in something that's really emotional for you. Right? Just a simple reminder, it's not about me. All right. Number 4, mindset number 4, curiosity. One of my all-time favorites, both as a mindset and as a behavior. And the mindset around curiosity is this. The problem is rarely as simple as it seems. I think it was David Maister who used to say, the problem is never what the client says it is in the first meeting. And sometimes that's because clients are pushing us or testing us a little bit. Sometimes it's just because the client isn't necessarily clear on what it is. So use curiosity, focus on what you don't know, not just on what you do know. Ask the questions to get behind what's being presented or behind the information that's being shared with you. not only will it help you get to a better solution, it also helps you earn the right to be right, because you will have done the due diligence and demonstrated to your client that you've thoroughly explored what the problem is. And so when you present a solution, they will understand that the solution is right for them in their circumstances. That's how we earn the right to be right. And I'll share just a quick story. A couple of years ago, I woke up one day with a pain in my shoulder. And I thought I'd slept wrong on my shoulder. A couple of weeks went by, the pain didn't go away. Started talking to some friends, some people said, oh yeah, I have similar things, rotator cuff issues, you should get it checked out. Instead of making an appointment, I did the worst thing in the world. I got online and I started looking at, WebMD and what could be causing shoulder problems. And I had myself so wrapped around the axle. It could have been anything from like a rotator cuff injury to, oh my gosh, I've got cancer, I'm going to be gone within 6 months, right? Because that's where WebMD takes us, or any of those. I don't mean to throw shade on that particular one, but any of those internet searches. So I finally went to my doctor, told him about the pain. He asked me a couple of questions, said, you've got acute subacromial bursitis. I'm going to send you to a specialist. You'll get a cortisone shot. It'll all be fine. I was like, wow, but I looked on the internet and it could be a lot worse than that. He's like, no, just go to the specialist. So I went to the specialist. The specialist spent a half hour poking, prodding, manipulating my arm. He did scans. He did a couple of x-rays. He asked me a ton of questions. After about 30 minutes, he said, I'm pretty sure you have acute subacromial bursitis. We're going to give you a cortisone shot and it'll be fine. I went, oh, thank goodness. He figured out what the problem was. Same answer from both my general practitioner and the specialist. And so I did ask the specialist, I said, well, how did my GP know? With just a couple of questions, this is what it is. My least favorite response from doctors, which I get a lot these days. Well, in somebody your age, when you get this type of pain in that place, 95% of the time, that's what it is. He said, and so the other tests we were doing were to rule out some of the more severe possibilities. My GP was right, but he hadn't earned the right to be right with me. I didn't believe him. I didn't trust what he said because he hadn't listened to me. He hadn't got curious. He hadn't thought about other possibilities. So curiosity is not just about getting the right answer. It is also about earning the right to present that answer. And some of the things that get in the way of curiosity, we might be overly confident from our past performance. I've seen this before. I know what the answer is. We might just be really eager to solve the problem. And that can come from a good place too. That can come from, I really want to help my client. I want to stop their pain, or I want to get them to a better place faster. Right? And so we focus so much on solving the problem that we forget the importance of understanding the problem. And it also could be the result of either unexplored or unrecognized assumptions. And I hired a company recently to redo our online self-assessment, the trust quotient. And we were 6 months in when we realized that we had been talking like this about a certain area. And at that point, it was too late for me to get what I wanted because I had assumed certain things. So not even recognizing that we have those assumptions can be dangerous. My mindset hack for curiosity, one question: what's behind that? Non-judgmental, open, just an opportunity for the other person to share a little bit more before we move on to the next step in problem solving. All right. Mindset number 5, inclusive professionalism. This is not inclusive in the sense of DEI. This is inclusive in the sense of we are working together with our client. So it is the professional and the client inclusive. Inclusive professionalism means truly being in it with the client. Not having the attitude that I'm the professional, they brought me in, I'm here to fix them. I'm here to do something that they are not capable of doing. Right? If they could do it themselves, they wouldn't hire me. That's just not the case most often. So inclusive professionalism is about recognizing that our job is to help the client, not just solve their problems. And that in order to do that correctly, we have to recognize the value that the client contributes to it. They are specialists and experts in their job. We may have a different perspective. We may have different experience that we can bring to bear, but they are also very expert at what they do. And finally, in order to be successful, we must do this together. Some of the barriers to that, the inhibitors to inclusive professionalism, fear of losing control, patronization, in the sense of, well, you know, fine, I'll let them talk, I'll listen to them, and then I'll go away and do what I know is right. Or assuming that anything that they have can't be valuable because they wouldn't have asked us to be here if they knew how to solve it in the first place. And then a lack of transparency. That can also be exclusive when we keep secrets about, and I'm not talking about sharing corporate secrets or specific intellectual property, but if we're truly collaborating, being open about how and why that works. So the mindset hack for inclusive professionalism is a simple statement. We will be more successful together. Right? And that means they have something to add and we have something to add. Because without them being successful, we can't be successful. So that's number 5. Number 6, this one is a bonus. It is not in the Trusted Advisor, but I've taken it from a number of concepts in the Trusted Advisor and trust-based selling. And this mindset is simply that the relationship is the goal. So often we get focused on the work that we're doing, the product that we're creating, the deliverable that we have, that we forget about the relationship. When in fact, it's the relationships that endure, not the project or the results. Relationships survive bad events, not projects. And relationships lead to growth, not deliverables. Right? The impediments to us keeping the relationship as the goal, short-term thinking. I just have to get through this project. I just have to get this deliverable done. Versus long-term thinking. If I'm focused on the long term, what might my prospects look like 10 years from now with this client? Whether or not I do a good job today, what do I want to be doing with them 10 years down the road? If I only focus on this particular project or interaction, then I give up all of that potential future. Similarly, only focusing on the technical problem. Because if I focus on the technical problem and I solve the technical problem, I have nothing left. If I focus on the relationship, I can solve the technical problem and I still have the relationship. And then the final thing is a lack of willingness to invest emotionally. And when I say invest emotionally, I mean just that. To care about our clients, to care about them as human beings, to care about their success, to care about our combined success. Right? These are impediments. An unwillingness of that is an impediment to the relationship. The mindset hack is very, very simple. The relationship is more important. If you want to, you can add than ... The relationship is more important than not being blamed for being late. The relationship is more important than defending myself for making a mistake. The relationship is more important than completing this deliverable. Right? If we always put the relationship first, then our behaviors will follow. So 6 mindsets to build trust quickly. I want your input on this. Thanks, Felix. I want your input on this. Which of these mindsets are you most likely to adopt for 2024? and just pull up that chat and let me know which one is most likely for you to take on in 2024. Okay, as you're putting your inputs in there, I'm going to offer you a quick self-assessment, 4 quick questions to keep you on track as you think about your mindsets for 2024. Number 1, who am I thinking about? Number 2, what does the client feel about this? Number 3, who am I serving by my present approach? And number 4, what am I afraid of here? If you ask yourself these 4 questions and then think about your mindset, this will help you be intentional. Okay, that's it. I'd love to hear from you what your biggest takeaway is. Go ahead and pop it in the chat to everybody. And I do want to get some feedback from you. Hayden, will you go ahead and pop up our quick poll on how helpful this webinar has been for you? And I will stay on for questions. I know, I apologize, we ran a little long, but I'll stay on if anybody wants to stay on and ask any questions.
Nicole, I think the curiosity, do you run a risk that I know you said, you want to be like the doctor, to be interested and curious and ask the questions. And I know one of the books has the great story about, guy goes to 2 different doctors, and one says they both prescribe the same thing, but one says it after a long discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you run the risk of coming across as ignorant about the situation, or how do you guard against that?
What's behind it? Are you all finished with the poll? Because we'll close that down and then I can shut everything down and we can just talk face to face. If you want to just pop in anymore, we'll give you 5 more seconds. All right. Hayden, go ahead and close down that poll, and I'm going to stop sharing so we can just chat. So Andrew, what are you thinking? Like, what's your thinking behind that?
Well, maybe it's just a matter of how the questions are asked, but
Mhm.
you don't want to. You want to sound like you've done your homework and you've been listening and so on.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're asking about how do I balance off credibility, which is demonstrating that I know what I'm talking about, with curiosity, which is engaging and asking. Yeah.
I get the sense you're almost saying, keep asking questions even if you know the answer.
See, and I'm not there, and that is that's the line. And there are a couple of things. One is curiosity. True curiosity is authentic, right? So good questions are questions to which you do not already know the answer, but the answer can be discovered. We used to talk about, one of my colleagues had this phrase for it, stump the chump questions. And they were questions that were really formulated to demonstrate how smart the questioner was, while at the same time possibly suggesting that the person they were asking the question of might not be able to come up with the answer. The other extreme of that is asking questions to which you would reasonably have the answer, in which case you're obviously it's a technique, it's a ploy to get the other person talking. Like, that's more of a used car salesperson kind of approach. I think with curiosity, exploring it in ways that are truly interesting there's never anything wrong with that. If you're worried that there's an answer you should know, say it up front. No, I hesitate to ask this because I kind of feel like it's something you might think I should know already. I'm curious about XYZ. Or just say, I feel like I should know this already. And I want you to confirm it, or I have an idea and I'd like for you to confirm, or, I have an opinion on this, but I'm open to hear yours. Is that helpful?
Yeah,
I mean, protect your credibility, but oddly enough, curiosity is a way to increase credibility. Because if you've ever known somebody who just always knows the right answer, right? They always have to be right. It can be refreshing for somebody to say, yeah, I don't have all the answers, but let's.
yeah, I mean, I often tell people who I work with that there's two ways to look like you're smart. One is to tell people, and the other is to ask good questions.
Definitely. Great. Other questions? Were there any other questions in here? I saw Lindsay, thank you. Lindsay popped an article in there that Peter mentioned. I will make sure that that's the right one. Any other questions or comments? All right. In that case, have a great rest of your day. I enjoyed talking with you all, and hopefully we'll see you back here on another webinar.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.